Hello, welcome to The Truth You Are Not Being Told about Trump's deportation policy. I'm going to share some concerns that have arisen, frankly, courtesy of Utah illegitimate Governor Spencer Cox, who has been posting on this issue and committing to assist in this mass deportation plan. And right out of the gate, I saw this post on Twitter from the illegitimate Utah governor, and this immediately called to mind why one of the major reasons why I'm concerned about this is it's not just a question of what does the policy sound like in terms of a campaign promise. Oh, we're going to deport all of the illegal immigrants. I love that idea. Frankly, I love the idea of only people who are here legally should be here. So it sounds nice, but just like with any executive order or ballot initiative or law, uh, we need to look beyond just what's the fair promise being made on paper in the headlines and so on, and look into the fine print and genuinely ask the question, what could go wrong? And the fact of Governor Cox supposedly being in favor of this when he has a long and terrifying history of being very pro-illegal immigration and enticing illegal immigrants here and making it a sanctuary state for them, despite his protests to the contrary that that's not what he's doing. That's very much what he's been doing. And so when politicians flip-flop like this, it's a very clear indication to all of us, the populace, that they are not being sincere, that this is just political theater. And so this is one of my big concerns is who is going to implement this first? What powers are we granting? And are those powers constitutional? And what could go wrong? So we've got to ask that question. So that's what this is going to be about. So let me go ahead and share just an article here from Reuters. So Trump, this is about the legal ramifications of Trump using the military to assist in these deportations. And again, just put on your thinking caps here and say, what could go wrong, right? And I understand a lot of Republicans are very excited about Trump being our president, and what could go wrong is kind of last thing on our minds right now. But this is how the two-party system works is it's actually a set spike type of maneuver. One party will do something that's unconstitutional but popular in their movement, and people think that the ends justify the means, and therefore it's okay to do that. And then the other party comes in for the kill. They do the spike, and it's usually the party that does the spike that scores a hit against our liberties that ends up taking the blame for it. But what we too often fail to recognize is that they work in tandem. They have the other one has set them up for it. And I have multiple illustrations of that, including I invite you to stick around till the end of the video where I'm going to go over an example of how both Biden and Trump have actually been collaborating to hand AI supremacy over to the Chinese Communist Party on a silver platter through tariffs and other policies. But let's go into just what could go wrong with this deportation plan, and think about what we should think too about what could go right, but we need to have a realistic check in place if anything's going to go right? So, all right, let's just jump in. President-elect Donald Trump has vowed to use the U.S. military to help deport millions of undocumented immigrants, a plan that breaks from U.S. tradition against deploying troops domestically, but which legal experts said would still be hard to successfully challenge in court, right? So right out of the gate, this is fair warning right here that there's a lot of power that is being promised to be employed here, and this is, I think, a very good thing to call out, that it might be hard to challenge the use of such force right in our own backyards even. So beware of that, and we need to know what those legal arguments are and so on. Trump advisors have said they intend to use the military to build detention camps or to transport undocumented migrants out of the U.S., freeing Border Patrol and immigration agents for investigations and apprehensions. So again, sounds really nice for those of us who hate the effect of illegal immigration on so many things, from housing to crime to poverty and everything else. We love law and order, but let's think about this. Military is coming in, building detention camps all around the country. Okay, what could go wrong, right? And this, by the way, I'm not going to go too much into the economic arguments here, but I think that's a concern as well, right? And I don't think any of us have adequately appreciated exactly what this is going to entail. So So experts said the administration would have legal cover if the military is confined to support roles. Support roles like, bringing down a Humvee to uh, come and abduct people at midnight or whatever. I don't know. Um, so yeah, I'm leery of this. So particularly on the border with Mexico without interacting with suspects. So yeah, if we have a militia, I'm in favor of them being assigned border patrol duty. That's fine. But if they're involved in building detention camps and so on and providing some extra strong arm for the local police departments, I think there is cause for concern. Okay, so I think it probably won't face a lot of successful challenges. There's too much ambiguity in these laws to point to something that says, hey, you absolutely cannot do this. I would beg to differ with this, by the way. If you know what the Constitution says, there's a definitive basis for you to point to. It's not just in the laws, and there's been so much slimy perversion of the Constitution to the point where congressmen write laws and executives make their orders and so on, and it is presumed that there's something I'm fighting right now in this Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court, called the presumption of constitutionality. And the Utah Supreme Court just recently upheld it in my case and in another case. And what the presumption of constitutionality is the judges just say, well, if there's a law written on the books, we presume it is constitutional. And they use that as an out, as an excuse to say, well, there's a precedent of a prior ruling that says we just presume this law to be constitutional, which is just to say we're not going to actually examine whether or not it's constitutional because we just presume that it is, which is circular argumentation. So this whole argument of there's a precedent on the books, therefore we have to enforce it. If that were the rule, then we would still have Roe v. Wade, right? So bad precedents need to be overturned. The fact that they exist doesn't mean that they're right. So yeah, there absolutely is a solid basis for saying, hey, you cannot do this thing, you cannot cross this line, and I'm going to go into what some of those things are. So they talk about this 1878 Posse Comitatus Act, which bars the federal military from participating in domestic law enforcement. And wouldn't you know it, Congress has created exceptions that allow presidents to successfully use active duty military in support roles for things like fighting illegal drug trade, as well as during breakdowns of law and order. So if you are at all concerned about, the drug wars and so on and the use of military force there within our own borders in particular, this is going to be that like times 1,000 at least. Trump has not explained how he plans to deploy the military to deport migrants. In a post last week on Truth Social, he responded, true, to another user's post saying his incoming administration would use military assets in a mass deportation effort. President Trump will marshal every federal and state power necessary to institute the largest deportation operation of illegal criminals, drug dealers, and human traffickers in American history, the spokeswoman said, whatever. Bill Clinton in the 1990s sent National Guard active duty soldiers to the border in support roles, ranging from surveillance to training and facing equipment. So experts said the support role exceptions to the act might also allow the military to build vast camps to hold those slated for removal. So this is going to be, if they actually follow through with this could be a very, very large demographic problem. And it hasn't been fully clear either whether, how they're going to find people who are here illegally. And that's one of my big concerns here, frankly, because that implies a gigantic espionage arm. And we're going to go through that. There are a few more articles that have something to say about that. So deporting 1 million, so right here is just kind of a knee-jerk estimate, I guess. I don't know where they get this number, 1 million. 1 million undocumented migrants annually will require the government to increase its detention capacity 20-fold, according to a report. So building massive prison camps around the United States. Again, what could go wrong? No one's going to abuse that, right? And sending the military to go and assist in the detention process, right? As long as they don't interact with you directly, as long as they're just off on the sidelines and just going to shoot you if you try to run away, then they're fine, right? That's not actually constitutionally accurate. So, okay. So, Department of Defense attorney said the more the military is asked to do, the more opportunities there are for legal challenges. But of course, this is one of their slimy loopholes right here. Is the fact of if you try to resist something that an unconstitutional executive branch is coming after you or your neighbors to try to do, and you try to resist that, and the military just comes and guns you down because you're resisting law enforcement or whatever, then they weren't asked to do that. They were just there in a support role. It's like there's so many loopholes. That doesn't count as a kill. That's an assist, right? Anyway, yeah. So I think we should seriously ponder what this means for us. Said using the military to build a detention camp might give a governor grounds to sue if funds for the camp were diverted. That's just a funding argument, right? So breach of norms. Um, yeah. So yeah. So this is one of my concerns right here. Is the governors of the states are actually responsible for executing on this plan, right? So it's like knowing that, and if you haven't seen my video on this, you should check it out. But the governor of the state of Utah is actually illegitimate. He cheated to be on the ballot. He and his accomplice, Deidre Henderson, the lieutenant governor, she administered her own election, and they knowingly issued counterfeit ballots in this last election, disenfranchising the Republican Party of their actual grassroots chosen nominee. You can watch that other video here on that. Um, but yeah, so this is one of the reasons why alarm bells are going off in my mind is who is being entrusted with this power. Sounds nice, sounds great, but at the end of the day, who are the boots on the ground who are doing it? Because if you have a mass incarceration emergency power that's being invoked and it gets delivered into the hands of Pancho Villa, that's not going to turn out so well, right? So who does it matters a ton. Um, yeah, so they say, yeah, there's a breach of norms here. There's mention of the Insurrection Act, which could be invoked here to deploy the military, and I have some serious constitutional qualms about that. Um, but yeah, they're just saying, yeah, this is going to be kind of difficult to challenge, and it's going to be implemented by your state governor, right? So I'm just going to go through a few more of these, and then we'll jump into the Constitution and see what there is to uh, what we can hang on to, despite what could be used against us, right? All right, to reverse the Biden invasion through a mass deportation program, right? So this isn't just the Biden invasion. This has been going on under like all of the presidencies, and I get that there is political theater going on to try to make it seem like a problem isn't as big, when in fact they're just setting the stage for the next phase of this, right? Um, yeah, so we've got if the incoming administration. So this is talking again about the use of the military in the deportation program. If the incoming administration were to pursue such a strategy, it might involve deploying National Guard units or other military resources under different legal frameworks, right? Potentially framing it as a public safety or humanitarian effort. Oh man, and this is one reason why like public safety isn't in our constitution. It's something that we need to watch out for arguments. Like there's no like sweeping power that's like, oh yeah, health and public safety, whatever, or humanitarian, whatever. Government doesn't have authority to intervene in all such cases. There are only two cases where the Constitution authorizes military intervention, and those are in the case of insurrection or invasion. And if it's not an insurrection, then you can't deploy the military. And if it's not an invasion, you can't deploy the military. And the Constitution even goes into specifics about what the military composition is, who is allowed to respond to those things, and it's not just a government arm thing. Okay, so the military could play such a role in such operations. The ramifications would be complex and contentious, requiring careful consideration of legal, ethical, and societal implications. So anytime they say they're going to need to consider something, that's a euphemism for they're going to hire bureaucrats to oversee these things, which means they're going to be slow to administer justice, and they're going to be quick to deny people's rights, most likely, because they have their processes in place for deciding what gets done and what they never get around to, right? All right. Transportation, construction, right? Yeah, so they're going to be building these big detention centers, right? They could not actually be the ones detaining illegal immigrants. They would be a support role, supporting law enforcement. So again, like when I hear this, like what goes off in my head, just this is just natural, Second Amendment defense right here is saying, okay, yeah, they're not the ones knocking on your door, or smashing it in. but they're off in the distance with on a Humvee with a minigun. So to strong arm you into submission, right? So yeah, just at a high level, this is this is concerning, and I understand like any and all alien enemies who are actually in our country need to be deported. It's just I don't trust the people who are going to be entrusted to do this to actually do that. So let's go to the next article. Yeah, and this right here is very concerning. Okay, this right here is if yeah. Let's jump into this one. President-elect Donald Trump's plan to mass deport millions of undocumented immigrants is gradually coming into focus this week as Trump and new members of his administration begin readying what they have called the largest deportation operation this country's ever seen. The administration will target millions of individuals based on their threat to society. Tom Homan, the border czar, said. Trump confirmed on Truth Social his plans to declare a national emergency. Okay, like again, like a lot of conservative news media outlets aren't using the term emergency. I'm noticing they're not using the term emergency powers, etc. But this should be ringing alarm bells in our heads. Like, because if he invokes emergency powers to do this, what happens the next time we have a Democrat in office? What kinds of emergency powers will they invoke? And if we transgress the Constitution by just a little bit, then they're going to do it even more in the future because there's a precedent for it, right? Remember that self-reinforcing circular argument to justify usurpation of power, right? Saying they primarily carry out support tasks and so on, but like still having the manpower to implement such a thing, it really, 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 really matters. Who's doing it and how are they doing it, right? Prioritize deportations for people who have criminal associations. Says Trump's going to do that. Been denied asylum, so that they've actually had some hearing on it, I presume, or come from countries of foreign concern, China and Nicaragua. Yeah, again, this sounds nice, but okay, look at this. But no one's off the table, Homan told the Center Square, raising the possibility that Trump will target families or other undocumented immigrants who have lived and worked for many years in the United States. And I'm not saying this as I'm not a Democrat, not at all. I don't buy into the argument that people deserve to be here just because they're here, and I don't. But at the same time, this no one's off the table. I'm just going to tell you point blank that includes you, and reasons for that include the fact that they have to actually undertake mass surveillance in order to make this a reality. Yeah, I think the it's going to look. There was one of these articles. Yeah, there we go. Military defense attorney suggested the military could help ICE by conducting drone surveillance of removal targets, providing security at migrant detention centers and stuff. So it's like, I know there's some even more clear inferences that could be made from this, but the fact of the matter is, in order even to identify who is eligible for deportation, they actually have to. Oh, here it is. Sorry, skipped over this. Homan said that adding that America's intelligence agencies will help identify and locate those targets, and immigration agents will arrest them. So, okay, so they're just saying point blank, right on the table. Like they're saying America's intelligence agencies are going to be the ones to help identify and locate who is here illegally. And he's warning us, no one's off the table. He means that. He means that. So if you were not a fan of Bush era, citizen surveillance, illegal things like the Patriot Act, spying on law-abiding citizens, then you should hate this new mass deportation program because this is that on steroids. This is like 100 times that. Because yeah, they've got to have boots on the ground. And my suspicion, honestly, around this is that state actors that are enemies of the United States, like the Chinese Communist Party and Putin's Russia and so on, they're not satisfied with the amount of surveillance data that they have gathered on American citizens just through social media and other online mechanisms. They want boots on the ground to be able to spy on people and detain them on a whim. So this is key. We need to make sure we protect defendant rights here. And this is something that I hear way too few Republicans talking about because we're just so excited to be like, oh yeah, let's get rid of all the illegal immigrants and stuff. But there's this circular reasoning that happens in people's minds when they say, oh yeah, the government wants to get rid of, our president wants to get rid of all of our illegal immigrants. Well, who's he going to use to do it? Well, the corrupt people in our more local governments and military, right? And And the argument of like, well, how are they going to identify who's here illegally? Well, they'll just know. It's like, well, how do they know? Oh, it's because they're spying on you. They have to collect a big dossier on you to verify that you're not like hiding some, that your renters in your basement aren't here illegally and stuff like that. So they're actually going to be doing, and they already have been doing, but this is just an excuse to collect a ton more information on you and target you. And if we think that this isn't going to be used against us, then we're pretty naive. Just going to say that. So, um, yeah, okay. So, 52% of Americans. This is fascinating right here. 52% of Americans said, according to this poll, that they somewhat or strongly support the mass deportation of those in the country illegally. But that support drops when respondents are asked about different types of deportation programs. Only 38% of Americans say they would support an operation that separated families, for instance. Right? And I mean, Congress has been in the business of separating families for a long time. If you don't believe me, just go back to the Edmunds and Edmunds-Tucker Acts of 1882 and 1887. That's exactly what they did in the territory of Utah already. So this is nothing new for them. But we do need to stand up for people's rights, even if they're here illegally. They still have defendant rights under the United States Constitution, and that's like the reason why I'm speaking up right here is because these people have rights, and you do too. And even if you did something wrong, and the government's coming after you, you still have defendant rights. And I'm here to stand up for that. And we need more people to stand up for you and for your rights. And that means we need to stand up for the rights of people we disagree with. I disagree with illegal immigrants being here, but that doesn't mean that I just say, oh, they don't have any defendant rights. They still have defendant rights under the Constitution. And this is something that we can do a great job of standing up for. And we need to, if we're going to have our own rights protected. So what I mean by that, again, is like, you have to avoid this circular argumentation trap. The circular argument is, we want to get rid of illegal immigrants. So we greenlight Trump's unconstitutional plan to do mass deportations. It's not that deportation is unconstitutional itself, but the unconstitutional part comes in around if you presume that a person is here illegally, you presume they committed a crime, or you circularly argue in such a way that allows law enforcement or the military or federal investigators, anybody, intelligence agencies, to gather information on you without probable cause. Because that is a clear violation of your Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights. They can't just surveil you and look for a crime and then just assume that they need to have probable cause, right? And probable cause is millions of times easier, of course, if they can just spy on everyone. So my question is, why are we granting the federal government power to do that, right? So because that's not constitutional, just quite frankly. So I do want to bring this up because illegal immigration is and has been a huge problem. There was this study done 2018 by Yale University saying that the popularly accepted estimates of illegal immigrants was like 11 million-ish. And they're saying, yeah, it could easily be double that. And I find this highly credible, by the way. Any news media source that claims that, oh, it's way lower than that or it's whatever, they're just lying to you because, one, they don't even know, and two, like when you don't watch, when you're not even watching the border, when you're not even keeping track, and then you perform an estimate based on what you think you do know, like that's always going to be a very, very, very conservative estimate, right? So anyways, they looked at various data sources and they estimated, yeah, here's their just a whole bunch of different possible scenarios that they analyzed. And this big, thick black line is the average of all of those estimates. And the blue line down here, which is outside the range even of all of the more realistic estimates, is the current widely accepted estimate. And again, this is pre-pandemic. This is pre-Biden era stuff. And so I would not be at all surprised if there were at least 33 million undocumented immigrants here right now, illegals. So this is a huge widespread problem, and there are only, 330 million people in the United States altogether. So this is like 10% of everybody who's here is an illegal immigrant, most likely, And again, people could challenge me on that and say, oh, it's a little bit more, a little bit less. Like, dude, it's still on the order. It's the same. No one can refute that it's on the same order of magnitude, at least, as 10%. 10% of the people who are here being illegal immigrants. So this is a very huge, very serious societal problem. It does have, I will touch on just briefly, massive, largely unanticipated economic consequences. Because for the very most part, like I won't say illegal immigrants are the only people here who are doing the actual infrastructure work in our country, but they form a large part of the backbone of it at this point. And we become so dependent on them. Like there are an awful lot of college kids. They're going to have to go and get jobs now as, sorry, not college, high school age kids, maybe even younger, who are going to need to go get jobs as plumbers, construction workers, you know, road maintenance crews, and so on, right? Because of and go work at McDonald's and stuff because of all these people being deported. If it works out that way, right? If it even works out that way, but this could be used as a tool to manipulate our economy to make it just tank. And then because of labor law or whatever, you can't actually replace that workforce, right? So this could be used for economic extortion as well, and it's a very serious bargaining chip. And this is part of the reason why a lot of Republicans in particular, I think, have had it's a bipartisan issue, but a lot of people have had like a conflict of interest here because a lot of people are employing these guys, and if this labor source is gone, then yeah, our economy is going to tank, and they don't want to lose millions of dollars, and so there are people, including conservatives, who are like, okay, what do I do now, right? What happens if my labor force just dries up, right? You can't get that cheap labor. So again, it's a bipartisan issue that we've been exacerbating and building up for years, and now we're just saying, oh no, we should do something about this, and it's too little, too late, and wrong timing. So, like, employing even a good policy at the wrong time makes it a bad policy, right? If you implement a good policy at a bad time or in the wrong way, it's just not a good idea. And I'm not claiming this is good policy anyway, but okay. So on a couple points on the use of the military, right? So the Constitution says that Congress has authority to provide for the calling forth of the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions, right? Okay, so this is key here because it is a fact that the Constitution does not tolerate a standing army. Go to the appropriations clause. Yeah, to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years. So if you have just this perpetual federal budget for a standing army, that's expressly forbidden under the Constitution. One more point on this. So the militia of the United States is defined in federal law. It's defined as all able-bodied males at least 17 years of age and under 45 years of age who are or have made a declaration of intention to become citizens of the United States, right? So this is the militia, by the way. If there's an insurrection or an invasion or the law has been violated and we need citizen muscle to execute the laws of the Union, guess who is summoned? That's right, able-bodied American males, right? That is who the militia of the United States is. This idea of having a separate like branch of the government that is the military very easily becomes a political tool. And if we don't realize that, then we're failing to learn the lessons from Mao Zedong's China and so on, where the military became an arm of a political party instead of something that belongs to the people. So if you want to actually support the Second Amendment and so on, you need to be in favor of the militia as defined as the people themselves, and that's what the Second Amendment says. The Second Amendment says that the well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So again, this affirms the federal code definition of the militia. It's you. It's you, the people. It's we, the people of the United States of America. This is who the militia is. This is who should be summoned. And so the idea of having something that is basically an arm of the executive branch and of a particular administration in the executive branch, that's hazardous. That's a wrong precedent. I'm not saying that the president isn't the commander-in-chief of the militia, but I'm saying that the control structures in the militia need to remain with the people, right? So that acts as a check against the use of just this standing army thing, which is unconstitutional, to come and just try to enforce laws and stuff. So that was one of the first alarm bells that went off when I heard, wait a minute, he's going to come use the military to do this. Well, That's the people themselves. There shouldn't be the standing army thing. So this power structure that could be used against us, that's extremely hazardous because I mean, I don't know that I've seen very much of infringement on the Third Amendment point, but I mean, this could very well lead to, violations of this protection against the Quartering Act and stuff of King George. So things like that. All right. The other thing, though, we're getting into is, probable cause and warrants, right? So if they're going to locate like all of the illegal immigrants in the United States, because that's what they're purporting to do here. That's what they're promising. Trump is saying, yeah, I reserve the right to go and track down every single illegal immigrant within the country. And I'm like, yay, wait a minute. Once you realize who's implementing it, then you realize, wait a minute, this means massive, massive, unprecedented, Central Intelligence Agency espionage against the citizens themselves. And because, yeah, it's again, you have to avoid the circular reasoning. We don't know in advance who all of the illegal immigrants are. I don't know of my own neighbors, 100%, who's here legally and who's here illegally. You have to do some investigation to find that out, and you have to investigate people who are here legally in order to figure that out, right? And so this means, especially where, like, in many instances, there's not a paper trail by definition. If they're here undocumented, there's no documentation to demonstrate that they're here. This means they will be doing house raids. They will be doing searches, and probably a lot of warrantless searches in order to carry this out. So this is one of the reasons why I'm just pumping the brakes pretty hard here to say, whoa, wait a minute. Take a step back. Like if again, I am wholeheartedly in favor of people should only be here legally, but if we're going to transgress constitutional boundaries in order to do that, then that's a big red flag. So I'm just going to propose here and say, like, there's no reason to give the federal government control over this, because if they do, again, you have the Patriot Act times 100 at least, because they're going to be profiling tons and tons of innocent and law-abiding citizens and just kind of scrutinizing you and looking for excuses to come after you, right? And building up these detention camps that, let's suppose, in an imaginary world, let's say all the illegal immigrants are gone, we have these massive prison camps. What are we going to use them for, right? So, and now they also have this precedent of warrantless searches and violating probable cause and so on. And so, yeah, I had this dream last night actually of, being asked to, hey, come and let's come into your house kind of thing. And I'm like, no, you don't have probable cause, and I can prove it. You're not satisfying the constitutional definition of probable cause. I'm happy to, show up in court, but my defendant rights need to be respected, right? So anyways, not legal advice, I guess, because I'm not a bar certified lawyer, but for entertainment only, right? Anyways, so yeah, huge red flag here of just, are they going to be doing all these warrantless raids and stuff? But here's the solution. What is this grand jury thing in the Fifth Amendment, right? It says no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Okay, so what a grand jury is, most people have no clue what a grand jury is. A grand jury is it's a group usually of 25 citizens who will meet together, and they will conduct a preliminary investigation whenever there is an allegation of an infamous crime, right? And being accused of potentially being like a foreign spy, or of being here illegally as part of a military incursion or invasion, as some people have used the term, and I don't disagree with that at all points. I believe there are people here who are occupying and invading. That accusation is certainly one that would qualify as an infamous crime. And this is saying there's no way you can do that. There's no way you can hold them even to answer for it, right? There's no way you can even conduct a trial for such a crime under any such allegations unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury. So that means these 25 people need to go and do their homework, and they need to figure out, and they need to come to a consensus about whether this individual likely committed such a crime, such that they are willing to undergo an investigation and potentially convict, right? The grand jury does not convict. They just decide, hey, are we going to go through the trouble of the risk to this person's reputation and the expense in time and effort to put this person on trial. And this exception, um, we need to be very aware of. It says it does make an exception in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. So if that card gets played here to say, oh, it's in the militia and this is a public danger, right? Because that's the argument that's being played here to say that this is a national emergency. It's a public safety emergency, right? Public danger, right? So this invoking emergency powers could potentially enable someone to try to weasel out of the grand jury requirement. Um, but that's not valid in this case because it's not taking place within the ranks of the militia, and especially if it is a standing army rather than the actual authorized constitutional militia that's going around being involved in this, and that would not stand up. So be aware of that if that if slash when that comes to fruition and people are being charged over that. Grand juries, yeah, there's a history in the state of Utah of those being destroyed, and they've been replaced with by federal marshals and state prosecutors, and they are very very nasty to deal with because it means that you do not have representation among the populace anymore of even deciding who gets charged with the crime. So, um, but I also want to call out this is I think hands down the biggest thing right here is in all criminal prosecutions the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed. So this is the thing. If we're going to deport anybody, we have to hold jury trials, full jury trials of 12 honorable jurors that are selected at random, not with a thumb on the scale, not with this. Got this little article here, blurb on voir which is this process by which potential jurors are questioned either by the judge or a lawyer to determine their suitability for jury service, which is totally bogus, by the way. If they try to do this, the reason why this exists is to try to exclude certain people, to question their fitness, and say this is why the government will summon a whole bunch of people for jury trial and then only pick a subset of them. It's because they're stacking the juries. That's why that exists. Voir dire is not it's not an enumerated power of the government itself. The people did not grant them that power, and you should call them out on that if they ever try to do this. The whole purpose and precedent behind it was that jurors could challenge one another, and if there was a near unanimous agreement among the jurors, then they could expel a fellow jury member on suspicions of bias or so on. But it was never an instrument of the state. It was never an instrument of the government. That's completely unconstitutional that they've appropriated that. So yeah, jurors can vet one another, and by I forget whether it's majority consent, but there has to be some it has to be an actual grassroots opinion that hey, this guy is not qualified to serve with us, right? Rather than the government picking and choosing their jurors, because that's a stacked jury. That's not fair. That's not impartial. Okay, but yeah, back to the speeding public trial. Yeah, if we're detaining people in prison camps, and if we are deporting them from the country, even if they did break the law, even if they're like the worst criminals out there, and even if they're the not worst, then they still need to have a jury trial. I had a neighbor some time ago. This was in Utah, when and he was. I understood that he was not here legally. He was an illegal immigrant. But what he had to say about Utah's process really, and the bureaucracy behind it was really revealing, because I had been noticing how there was this catch and release policy with these really bad criminals, very dangerous thing. And he was saying, yeah, they're going after me more because I'm law abiding. I'm like, well, that's interesting. So if you have these enforcement issues and they do go after the people who are more upstanding people, that's problematic, right? So again, it comes down to who's implementing the policy and so on. Uh, yeah, it's just if you can't control for that, then that's a problem. I would rather have, a neighbor who crossed the border illegally but is otherwise a decent, respectable, law-abiding person. I would much rather have that than an illegitimate governor like Spencer Cox. and especially having him be the one who's authorized supposedly to go out and do this. That does not bode well, because it has been weaponized already against the, shall we say, relatively innocent sector of the populace. All right, so yeah, you need a jury trial, and what this gives you is, if you find out that these raids are being conducted, and this is a big question that we should have is, wait a minute, who else is going to get disappeared? If we have 10% of the American population just disappearing, who knows over what time frame? But if they start normalizing these midnight raids and whatever, or broad daylight, who's gonna speak up? Who even what happens when they arrest somebody who is an American citizen and detain him under false pretenses? Well, or because they spied on him unconstitutionally. They did a warrantless search and investigation, right? Who's going to speak up for them? If they don't have that speedy and public trial by a jury of their actual peers, then they can't defend themselves against really bad laws, really bad edicts, and so on. Um, so yeah, this could spiral out of control really, really quickly. And it could do so by design, because if we're transgressing these constitutional boundaries to go after these people that we don't like the idea of them being here, it's going to get weaponized against us. I guarantee it. So yeah, insist on that. Insist on a jury trial, and insist on a grand jury to indict anybody who is here illegally. Right? That's the way it should work. You should have, and grand juries are by design a grassroots system. They're not an arm of the government. They're ordinary law-abiding people who come together and have a council, and they say, "Hey, we've got evidence that the governor cheated, or the senator cheated in his election. We're going to issue an indictment." And as long as they agree, they concur that there is sufficient evidence to do that, then they can proceed to do that, and they don't need the blessing of a state-employed prosecutor or anything like that. They don't have to do that. They can issue that indictment. And importantly, the jury also has this important ability called jury nullification. That is to say, if someone if the local community decides it's actually in our best interest to keep Jose around, like maybe we even recognize that, yeah, he crossed the border illegally or whatever, but let's say he's like a better citizen, or a better, sorry, we'd like for him to apply for citizenship, and we want to open up that possibility. He's a better resident, he's a better human being than all these criminals who are trying to run things in government. You can actually say no. You can actually refuse to convict, and then the federal government can't touch him. The state government can't touch him. They can't fine him for a cent. They can't detain him for a microsecond without being accorded a speedy public trial by an impartial jury. And that's something that's right, and the Constitution as well. The trial of all crimes, except in cases of impeachment, shall be by jury. Right. So it's not rocket science. It's just, we need to actually make sure that people's defendant rights are maintained. And I'm not aware of a whole lot of public dialogue or rhetoric on this subject in particular, because I know people are going to come out and say, "Oh, no one's taking anyone's rights away. Don't worry, they'll get their defendant rights and whatever." And then what happens? They'll cut little here, cut little there, and we know our government can't be trusted. We know that they are already accustomed to cutting corners wherever they feel like they can get away with it. So, anyways, just some things to watch out for here, and yeah, we've already gone over the militia. Yeah, and yeah, Spencer Cox. This is why I'm doing this video, is because he's all gung ho about this. He's like, Governor Cox announced a targeted effort by the state government to support the incoming presidential administration's priorities on illegal immigration. We know that's total baloney. We know that Spencer Cox is not supportive of actually getting around to deporting illegal immigrants. Right? The state's actions will be a joint effort by the Utah Department of Public Safety and the Utah Department of Corrections to enhance coordination with federal, state, and local partners to identify, incarcerate, and to deport more illegal immigrants who have committed crimes and pose a threat to public safety. So he's still like putting it in a soft glove of to be friendly towards his Democrat friends and say, "Oh, don't worry. We're only going to go after those who commit crimes and stuff." But again, you have to question, like, what's the charter here? What's the power we're granting these people? Who is being granted that power? How is it being implemented? Are there any checks on it? And unless we have those jury trials, we are sitting ducks for military to just come in. And I know they're going to be legal experts who are like, well, they can't actually do that because they're only there in a support role. It's like, that's still coercion. And if they're spying on us already, like, hello, this is like, this is the this is the Patriot Act 2.0. So I get that there are a lot of people who are like, well, Trump's more moderate and stuff, but no. This isn't the Bush thing. It's not even just a. It's across the board. This is secret combinations right here. They're trying to come up with unconstitutional reasons to spy on the people and create detention camps and stuff. And you don't even have to have the biggest conspiratorial mind to to grasp the gravity of this situation, right? It's yeah. What powers are they constitutional or not? Oh, they're not. Okay, that's important. No matter how much we the people seem to like the idea and how much news media personalities and Twitter personalities and others parrot this thing and say, "Oh, this would be such a great thing." Take a step back and think. Okay. Anyways, he's got his lovely little plan here, identifying additional intercept points in the criminal justice system and provide guidance and support and go after drugs more, which I am in favor of. You know, penalizing people for pushing drugs in particular. But I am not in favor of a federal espionage arm against the citizenry, right? Or a state one even. This has to be a grassroots thing, and that's what the grand jury, by the way, would give you. It would give you the power to, in a grassroots fashion, say, "Ooh, there's a guy who's got a meth lab. Let's go bust him." Oh, we all agree. Yep, there's enough evidence. We've heard the witnesses in the preliminary investigation, and now we're issuing an indictment, and now a jury's got to go hear your case. And boom, you got your criminals. Here we go. There's no need for federal investigative bureaus or anything like that going in and breaching the Fourth Amendment, collecting massive spy reports on everybody, right? Alrighty. Yeah, all their policy enhancements. Yeah, anytime the government promises to do something, you gotta watch them. You gotta watch them. Identify illegal immigrants. Yep. So again, and they're pulling the whole, public safety thing and all that. So, alrighty. Okay, I promised that I was going to show an example of how the two-party system has already been working in a set spike fashion to hand over AI supremacy to the Chinese Communist Party. So I'm familiar with this as an AI researcher. Back during the pandemic, I had a really difficult time sourcing graphics cards for machine learning training because this is what you need. You need these very expensive, very high tech, very bleeding edge, fast and power efficient graphics cards with a lot of memory to do your machine learning, your AI model training. This is the backbone behind AI. Without this, you would never have heard of ChatGPT, right? So the economics behind this is actually what's going to determine who wins the AI arms race to a great extent. And so, yeah, so here's this article from PC World called "A Perfect Storm: Why Graphics Cards Cost So Much Now," right? And they say it's complicated, right? But beneath that surface of complication, there were several policy decisions that actually, and events that were apparently coordinated on a global scale that just dumped, I would say trillions of dollars worth of not only assets but of competitive advantage into the lap of the Chinese Communist Party in the AI arms race. So okay, so they're like, yeah, demand for GPUs is high, and it's like, yeah, okay, I get that there are gamers in the United States. There were chip shortages because of all the stupid policies around not being allowed to go to work. So that and all the workplaces getting shut down during COVID. So that contributed. So policymakers are culpable for that. International shipping, so that's related. And scalpers, right? So that's kind of a you could have state sponsored or you could have independent scalpers, doesn't matter. But they're out there just trying to buy the product at its cheap price when it's released at the manufacturer suggested retail price, MSRP. They just buy it at that and then they'll mark it up a ton and then they'll resell it. And they do it because they can click the refresh button a lot or have some bots on eBay or whatever that can do that. So a lot of people were upset about that. But here's where I get into the Trump Biden set spike, right? So with tariffs, right? And to back up, zoom out, right? So when I heard Trump was in favor of tariffs, I was like, ooh, this is my kind of guy because, Joseph Smith, the prophet of the restoration, prophet of God, and, just he also ran for president of the United States and was assassinated during that campaign, during his presidential campaign. The first U.S. presidential candidate to be assassinated. Um, but he was in favor of a modest, a judicious tariff And the purpose of a tariff is to protect your domestic manufacturing against things like China has a lot of things. One, they use slave labor. And obviously, if Americans have an online marketplace like eBay, Amazon, whatever, Walmart open to them, or an in person like Walmart, so many of our goods come from China in part because of the deceptive economics here. And so, like, this is where our virtue of thrift can be manipulated. It's exploited against us. Because, in Utahns especially, we pride ourselves in being thrifty, right? So if there are two products in the marketplace and one's like you're looking for a pair of shoes, one pair is $50, another pair is $20, and they look the exact same, right? And they both look, their branding looks great and everything. You're like, oh, why don't I go for the $20 ones, right? What could go wrong, right? Never mind that they're much more cheaply made, much more shoddy, but also like so they cut corners. They don't have all the same regulatory stuff that we do in the U.S. and regulation doesn't even necessarily mean quality, but they don't have the EPA or anything like that. So their products are unfairly advantaged, unfairly favored in that regard. They leverage and exploit slave labor in China. If you did not know that, you need to know that. So we don't keep funding that. And they also do lots of little monkeying games like devaluing their own currency so that they get a more favorable conversion, more favorable trade rate with the United States. So they're actually, this is a state-sponsored initiative by the Chinese Communist Party. And they will actually even potentially sell some things at a loss just to gain a monopoly in the market, right? This is how American manufacturing went overseas. And our own congressmen, our own people in government, and our own presidents have been complicit in it for years, for over the past 30 years. They have been intentionally disadvantaging domestic suppliers. This is what the whole climate movement is about, or at least a large part of it is devoted towards the destruction of United States manufacturing and infrastructure. It's designed to weaken us so that in the pretty nearly certain eventuality of a world war, we will not be able to produce the industrialized components that are necessary to win the war. This is what won World War II for the Allies. It was the United States manufacturing or industrial backbone. That's what won World War II. It wasn't our ingenious military strategy, of which we were lacking, and it wasn't the atomic bomb. It was our industrial backbone. And the same is true in any wars in the future. They're all wars of attrition. All warfare is ultimately economic. And when you understand that, you can understand what the tariffs are doing here and why this is problematic. Because, again, the purpose of a tariff is to protect your own domestic manufacturing. It's basically to compensate for the fact that the Chinese Communist Party uses slave labor and devalues their currency and all that, so that the American products are, not as bad by comparison. Not they don't hit your wallet as much by comparison, right? So if you have a tariff on a Chinese product and you still have an American domestic product, more people will buy the American ones, which will drive down your prices because you'll have improvements to your process. You'll be funding, hopefully, good management in your own country in the production of these things, and you'll actually be able to keep some domestic manufacturing. Problem is with tariffs, just like with the deportation thing, you can implement what sounds like a great policy at the wrong time. Right now, this was exactly the wrong time for tariffs. And what was so wrong about the timing with it is we no longer had any domestic, chip manufacturing in the space. We have no bleeding edge manufacturing plants. They're all in like Southeast Asia, right? And so that means they're right on China's doorstep or else within China. And so what Trump's tariff policy on GPUs did during the pandemic, when there's this crypto mining surge, right? So people are buying up a whole bunch of GPUs for that. There's this AI boom, everything else. And you can see how this set the stage for AI supremacy in China. Because we were charging Americans a tariff on their own product. NVIDIA is an American company. NVIDIA is this graphics card company that produces the premier graphics cards that are used for training machine learning models. There are other companies out there that do similar stuff, but NVIDIA is the best supported, hands down, biggest stock in this race. And the chips are manufactured in Taiwan largely, but the finishing of all the printed circuit boards and everything is almost without exception done in China. And so what Trump's 25% tariff on GPUs did is it meant we are now paying, we the American people are now paying extra for our own product, which was designed in the United States, manufactured in Taiwan and then China, and then it hops over to America, but it has this tariff wall now. So what that meant was that the Chinese people and the Chinese government could buy up these GPUs without those tariffs because they're just right there. It's domestic manufacturing for them. So they're just buying their own product, basically, using American technology, by the way. And so they get the benefits of all of our hard engineering and research and development work, right? And so they're buying up our own product at bargain basement products, and we're basically charging ourselves for our own product now. And we're also paying the Chinese to put it together for us, which meant that they could ask whatever they want, right? Because now they have a monopoly, right? So the right time to have a tariff is when you still have a manufacturing base inside of your country, and you're trying to hedge against, the unfair, cutting corners and other practices like state-sponsored devaluations and stuff like that, slave labor. You're trying to hedge against that. You're trying to protect your local industry. The wrong time for a tariff is when you no longer have any domestic industry. If your manufacturing base is gone, like ours is today, it's the wrong time for a tariff, because what you're doing now is you're unfairly advantaging your foreign market, the market of your enemies. Like China is our number one diplomatic enemy, right? And yet they're our most favored nation in terms of our trade status. So this has been wrong for a really long time. And yeah, this led to things like gamers in the United States were upset because you couldn't buy an RTX 3090 laptop, So it was their high-end NVIDIA GPU at the time for gamers. You just couldn't afford one. They were like $3,000, bare minimum. And yet these Chinese crypto farms were just buying them up like hotcakes because they're cheaper over there. They're at least 25% cheaper. And it's like, why did we do this? Why did we do this? So the crypto mining race was one of the things that actually taught me that China has a massively unfair advantage here. Their electricity costs are actually much, much lower than they are here in the United States because they burn coal. They don't have the EPA telling them no, And so like their electricity costs are like half of what ours are, which means that if you buy crypto, you're actually subsidizing the Chinese Communist Party most likely, because they're the winners in this game. They're the ones who have the home turf economic advantage here, and our own congressmen and presidents are abetting that through this poor timing and perfect storm, huh? Just perfect storm of why is it so expensive for American gamers and for American AI researchers like myself to source parts. Why is that so expensive? Oh yeah, okay, Trump's tariffs, right? And I said this was a set spike across the party. So not only like this is one of the things that just alerted me to the fact that like, hey, Trump's policies aren't actually you can make them sound good on paper, just like the mass deportations. But this tariff was a terrible idea because it did the exact opposite of what tariffs are supposed to do, because it was timed exactly opposite of when a tariff is supposed to be timed in order to be beneficial to your home country. I hope you understand the economics behind this. I've seen this firsthand. I've paid out of my own wallet like a very hefty price for some of these terrible policies that continue to give China most favored nation status, even while Trump is supposedly cracking down on them, right? So, yes, and the pardon the language there. The cryptocurrencies, yeah. So, and again, who is benefiting? Who had the most favorable economy to do that? Communist China. They had the cheapest electricity. They had the cheapest graphics cards. Of course, they had crypto farms, right? And so and the thing with cryptocurrencies or any speculated asset is you can only afford to do it if you're uber wealthy and you have, like maybe state backing like this. So otherwise, the big people always eat the little people for lunch. That's what happens. But yeah, just to kind of prove what I'm saying right here. These are the RTX 4090 graphics cards from NVIDIA. These are already 2 years old, more than 2 years old, and they still haven't come out with the next series. But this is like the top of the line consumer card for machine learning, and like I can't get one for less than 2,000. Right? There was a point where they dipped almost to MSRP, but they have never gone significantly below MSRP, and it's because of this squeeze. Right? It's timing, kind of like with the Federal Reserve with their TikTok of adjusting the interest rates and increasing inflation to squeeze money out of the housing market and stuff. So anyway, but yeah, Biden. So working across the aisle here. This is real John Curtis style politics here. If you haven't heard yet, so when I was this was already 2 years ago, but on that occasion when I was a state delegate there, I got to interview him tons of times, and he said to our faces that he likes to work across the aisle, and he said you'd be surprised at how well we get along with Democrats behind closed doors, and I'm like, that wouldn't surprise me one bit. That doesn't surprise me at all, is the Democrat at heart, So, um, anyways, what I'm saying here is basically, yeah, both parties have been in on this. So, and this is precisely what the Biden administration did. They kept the tariffs. I mean, there was some kind of back and forth on it, right? But and now I think Trump is looking into reinstating tariff or increasing the tariffs even further. So it's just kind of like, well, what's the point, right? Tariffs, when you no longer have any domestic manufacturing to protect, are worth less than nothing. And so again, it's kind of the timing. Like a mass deportation policy could have been effective and it could have been good like 10 or 20 years ago, with the proper constitutional protections in place. But today, it's are we so radicalized? Honestly, frankly, can we have a candid, self-assessment here and recognize, have we become radicalized to the point where we think that it's okay to deny people their constitutional rights because and to promote like the biggest espionage program ever just because we want this guy in Washington to solve all our problems. The prophets have told us plainly, the Constitution will not be saved in Washington. Trump is not a messiah. So just some warning flags here. I am sure he advocates for some very nice sounding policies, and I hope we do leverage the impetus behind that as a nation to become more aware of these issues. But if we're not actually protecting people's rights along the way, then it's going to turn into a disaster. It's going to be used against us, whether by this administration or by the next. This precedent is dangerous. It's frankly deadly. So, anyways, yeah, feel free to check out my other videos on the signature scams. John Curtis was part of that, and what we need to do to restore Republican government. I talk more about jury trials in that. So, thanks for listening, and see you next time.